All right. Now, Jam, have you ever heard of ozonolysis?
I can, with great confidence, say I've never heard of that.
Well, ozonolysis is a chemical reaction. It's the reaction specifically of ozone, which is a molecule we've talked about before with 3 oxygen atoms.
Yes. Okay.
And most organic chemistry students have to learn about ozonolysis.
Okay.
And it holds a special place in my heart because when I was doing research on how students feel about learning organic chemistry, one of my favorite quotes that they said is, "I'll never need to know about ozonolysis or whatever else." And it was so funny and specific because up to that point, I also couldn't really think of a time when I had used ozonolysis,
right.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I use it as an example a lot of why are we teaching so much when we could be teaching some things more in depth.
Right.
So it's kind of like my pet reaction to dump on a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Well, it turns out that I was wrong because ozonolysis plays a big role in why oftentimes you might feel gross on airplanes.
Okay. Adding a chapter to the airplane situation here.
Adding a chapter to the airplane. So today we're going to talk about airplanes and ozone. Airplane, aeroplane, part 2.
Okay. Nice.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Hey, I'm Melissa.
I'm Jam.
And I'm a chemist.
And I'm not.
And welcome to Chemistry for Your Life.
The podcast helps you understand the chemistry of your everyday life.
Okay, so last week when we talked about airplanes, I mentioned that a lot of times I feel gross on planes.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get off the airplane, I barely even hug Mason. I'm like, I don't want to cover you in my airplane germs. And a lot of times he's like, no, I don't care. And hugs me anyway. But he does when I come home. If I try to get in bed with airplane clothes, he's like, absolutely not. Which that doesn't usually happen. Just sometimes I've been like, I don't know if I can do it. And he's like, you're covered in airplane head to toe. You got to shower. Hit the shower is clean.
So you each have your limits a little bit.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
He's down to hug you, but he has his own limit.
Yeah. Which I don't think I would ever actually get in bed with airplane clothes. But some people actually have a hard time breathing on airplanes. They get headaches, they get irritated eyes, maybe irritated throat. And the reason for a lot of that is ozone. And not just ozone, but also a reaction that ozone does, ozonolysis.
Okay.
So, the Earth has the ozone layer around it.
Mm-hmm.
We've done a whole episode about this, episode 110. What is the ozone layer? And we talked about how it's made up of these ozone molecules.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like, here's the layer of ozone and it can't leave this area. It's more like a layer with blurry lines. Like, here's a lot of ozone and it sort of diffuses as we get further away from it on either side,
Okay, yeah.
So that means as airplanes go up and they're getting higher to the ozone layer, there's just a higher concentration of ozone in the air as you're going up. So it's sort of like a slow increase until you hit the high concentration area. And that means that if airplanes are pumping in fresh air from outside, like we talked about last week,
right,
there is likely a higher concentration of ozone in the air.
Okay.
And that's bad.
Right.
You said right, like you knew it was bad. How'd you know?
Well, here, I think, I can't remember if we talked about that in that episode or not, but I do feel like I've just had in my head that ozone's not good for us in terms of, there's a reason why we breathe the air way down here.
Yeah.
But a particular story was a friend of ours was needing to use one of those ozone machine things to, apparently they have these for displacing all the air in a given building or house or whatever. If there's fumes in it or in this case, it was trying to remedy some a previous owner smoking in the house. So one of many recommended things was also do this and run one of these machines in your house for a while to displace all of the air in there and be very careful about being in there with it. You can get it started and get out of there. And when you go in there to turn it off, you need to leave it for a while before you can just go in there as normal without like a mask or whatever you call it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's all I know. I don't know why it's bad, but I could see why something that's not like the version of oxygen that we are used to breathing, that messing with that, I could see how it would have some not great consequences, but I don't understand why.
So,
like, why isn't it like one like atom better? You know what I mean?
You think.
Why isn't it just like so nice to breathe?
Well, the other thing I thought is we have those ozone alert days in Texas.
Oh yeah, what is that about?
That is when there's too high a concentration of ozone, especially on hot days or high pollution days. It can be hard for people to breathe because ozone is an irritant, actually. So yeah, you're right. Even though you'd want ozone, one more oxygen, you'd think more oxygen, you think that'd be better, but it's actually not. It's actually, I think I wrote down what kind of, it's a respiratory irritant, an eye irritant, and a skin irritant.
It's like too much of a good thing.
Yes, it will cause it can induce asthma attacks. People can have a hard time breathing, but also the other symptoms that I mentioned on airplanes, getting headaches, having itchy eyes, having a hard time breathing, all those can happen on airplanes potentially as a result of ozone. So we have to be careful about how much ozone gets into planes.
Right.
We're not just breathing the ozone, Sorry, I went a little off my notes. Let me find them for a second. I get so excited about ozone. I was just talking about it without even looking. Okay. So some planes, typically it's required for flights over 4 hours, have a catalytic converter that scrubs the air of ozone. And the way they do this is they have a metal that is able to interact with the O3 molecules. And basically, as it comes in, it facilitates a reaction, gives enough electrons for 2 oxygen molecules to bond together and make oxygen. And then the other oxygen from the O3 is left behind.
Okay.
And then a new ozone molecule will come in, and 2 of its oxygens will make an O2. And leave one behind. And those 2 that got left behind, they'll find each other and they'll go off too.
So we did do an episode about catalytic converters, didn't we? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sounding familiar.
So we can convert O3 into 6, we can convert those 6 oxygen molecules that make up 2 ozones into 3 typical oxygen molecules.
Okay.
So planes that are going to typically go longer than 4 hours, they are required to have that because otherwise the oxygen can kind of build up. And there are federal limits that are set of you can't have more than this much ozone in the plane at a time. Okay.
Smart.
Very smart. But sometimes the amount of ozone can still kind of build up, not quite to that level, but right at it, which can irritate people who are more sensitive. And then shorter flights also are not required to have it. I thought I was going to sneeze. Sorry. The people are like, what just happened? Long pause. Put an ad break right there. Okay. So shorter planes are not always, shorter flights don't always have to have it. But one study that I read did say that they were like testing the air for ozone and other things. And planes with older catalytic converters sometimes had similar levels of ozone as planes without them at all.
Interesting.
So, but catalytic converters are supposed to kind of be regenerated, but I guess at some point maybe that like reactions happening over and over maybe wears it down over time. So all that to say that we hope that most of the planes we're on have a minimal amount of ozone, not enough to irritate us. But if you notice yourself feeling particularly irritated, it could be that. But it's probably not only that. Because ozone does another thing, this ozonolysis I was talking about, which doesn't only happen on airplanes, but it can happen on airplanes. And it is kind of gross.
Okay.
So ozonolysis is a reaction specifically. It's also sometimes called oxidative cleavage because the oxygens will come in and cleave or break double bonds. So if you have 2 carbon atoms that have a bond together, that's a carbon-carbon single bond. It's usually made up of 2 electrons.
Okay.
But if they're sharing 2 more electrons, then we have 4 electrons shared between 2 carbon molecules. That's a double bond.
Okay.
And carbon-carbon double bonds are especially susceptible to ozone. And what will happen is basically that double bond will break in half and you'll get an oxygen added to each side.
Okay.
So instead of 2 carbons bonded to each other, now we have 2 carbons that are bonded to oxygen molecules.
Okay.
They're double bonded to oxygen molecules.
Okay, got it. So 2 carbons, 2 oxygens, but double bond.
Double bond.
Okay.
So carbon, oxygen, double bond. That is the foundation for some functional groups. We've talked about functional groups a few times. So basically they are, atoms will kind of tend to bond in similar ways over and over. And then you can kind of expect how they're going to act or function based on how they bond. And so when carbon is double bonded to an oxygen, if it has carbons on either side of it, that's called a ketone. And if it has a hydrogen on one side of it, that's called an aldehyde.
Okay.
There's a special type of aldehyde that has 2 hydrogens and only 1 carbon. That's called formaldehyde. And a lot of people have heard of that. Okay, so we can take carbon-carbon double bonds and break them in half, and we get all kinds of aldehydes and ketones as a result of ozonolysis, which my students have to learn in class, and they're like, I'll never need to know this. Well, here's why they need to know it. Our skin secretes lots of oils. These oils are, they serve a lot of functions to protect our skin. They're keeping moisture into our skin. They do a lot of great things. But they tend to have a lot of carbon-carbon double bonds.
Okay.
These carbon-carbon double bonds, like I said, are reactive. And so if you're in a situation where there's maybe more ozone than usual, and you have maybe dirty clothes you've been wearing all day, maybe on a long flight, maybe you didn't shower this morning when you woke up before you came and got on the plane, these oils will react with the ozone in the air and create a little pollution cloud around you with all of the new aldehydes that are easily they're like more volatile than oil, aldehydes and ketones that have reacted with this ozone. So the ozone will actually be depleted relatively quickly as it is replaced with basically these side products from reactions with the oils on our skin. And there's a name for this. This is called the Pigpen Effect.
Oh my gosh.
Because there's a cartoon character named Pigpen who just has that like dirt cloud around him. So we just basically, if you have a buildup of oils, which we kind of all do, and you're in an environment with maybe higher than normal ozone or whatever, it will make your own personal pollution cloud.
Wow.
And that can happen on airplanes where you can get the formation of things like aldehydes, which can also be irritants. And so you might be irritated then by the formation of those other things.
Right. Wow.
So, you may feel bad on airplanes or on ozone heavy days because the ozone itself is bothering you.
Right.
But you may also feel bad on airplanes or ozone heavy days, or specifically airplanes that don't have a good regulation on their ozone levels, because of all the other pollution that comes when disgustingly ozone reacts with the oils from our skin and bodies.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Isn't it?
One of those things about chemistry that I like still have a hard time wrapping my head around sometimes, which is not just like as we entered this conversation, I was thinking it would mostly start and stop with ozone does a thing to us. Yeah. But there's always that extra level of like, but what is it gonna buddy up with and make a new thing? Yeah. Or a thing that's not really new, but new in that situation, but that we are already aware of. Yeah. That is also bad. You know? I know. It's like, oh right, that can happen just at whim, you know? I know. Like sort of like how rust is like the natural state actually. Yeah. Yes. My oldest son just asked me today about some rusty shears we were letting somebody borrow. I put them out on the porch and he's like, what is all that? And I was like, that's rust. And he was like, oh, can we get it off? I was like, well, yeah, but it'll come back. Like, it just some old shears. We don't really need to do that. But he just like couldn't get, and he was like, why is it like that?
You're like, let me play you this podcast called Chemistry for Your Life.
And I was like, could I do the explain like a 5 version of this? You know, that is like kind of what I'm doing a lot. But in that particular one, I was like, it just happens when some metals get wet that rust happens. I know it's not just wet.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
You know, it's like
wet
he was like,
plus whatever's in the air that's helping. Yeah.
And he was at least for now satisfied by that.
Nice.
But yeah, it's interesting to me in the scenario that it's like, oh yeah, other things get made that are also not good.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, of course, the extra like the chemistry curveball that can happen anytime.
Yeah, anytime. I know. And I was thinking like, I started down this journey because I was like, what do they put in airplane air? Are we really just breathing recycled air? Because the last one was about being gassy. I'm like, are we just breathing in basically recycled parts? Is that what's happening?
Right.
And then I was like, no, they're pumping air in. And so I'm like, how do they get the air in and make it breathable? And then that's how we came to find out about this.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. And I think it's like at levels that are mostly safe. You know, we're not in any concern area, but I think if we're going on long flights without this, there would be higher concerns.
Yeah.
And people probably would be having more problems. And there's like, you know, studies that are exploring like, okay, well, maybe we're not reaching dangerous oxygen or ozone layers, but what are we happening with the levels of these other things? You know, so people are looking at what point does every flight need a catalytic converter to catch the ozone? And, you know, what are we doing here? You know, so yeah.
Yeah. It does make me think about like some of the pioneers of flight that were going on long flights, like Amelia Earhart. Took super long flights. I highly doubt they were thinking about the ozone back then.
Yeah. But was she in enclosed airplanes?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if at first, but at least when she was trying to do her like long flights, they were enclosed, and they had like enough of a cockpit for like 3 people to like interact and stuff. Like they had
It's crazy.
I know.
Well, and also like on early flights when you could smoke.
Oh yes.
What was happening in there?
I know. You know what's so weird is that like I'm wondering every time they do the instructions about, you know, no smoking, and you see all the lights and all that kind of stuff, no tampering with the smoke detectors.
Like who did that recently?
But I'm also like, hasn't it been a non-smoking? Flight's been non-smoking longer than they were ever smoking. Like
probably
commercial, like publicly accessible flying has existed for, you know, only however many decades. Like how many of those was smoking totally cool?
Yeah, not very probably.
And then how soon did they realize like this is a bad idea? Like what are we doing?
Yeah,
we're all trapped in here with all the smoke, and also like we can't even remotely risk fire. Like that's silly.
Well, I'm also wondering about. I know that also. I feel like a renewed era of people thinking you could vape anywhere is probably like
adding
you can't
to it.
vape anywhere.
Yeah, now all those instructions have been updated to like this includes e-cigarettes and vape pens and blah blah blah. They have to say it all just to make sure that people realize we are talking about you.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So new era. All right, so back into it here.
Yes.
Now I want you to try to explain back to me what happens with ozonolysis, and then I'm going to give you an even more disgusting fun fact about airplanes and ozone.
Even more disgusting. So we're feeling bad for multiple reasons. One, we're feeling bloated because of last week's episode.
Yep.
About how our gassiness is usually going to be increased. And then what's happening too is ozone, which is already in the air anyway, but even more present in higher altitudes.
Yep.
The air they're bringing into the planes is coming from outside, which has more ozone because we're up there.
Yep.
But they do have a way of mitigating the amount of it with the catalytic converter. Do you want me to do that part too, or just get to the ozonolysis or ozone?
I think just go to the ozonolysis, yeah.
So the amount that does get in, the O3 that is entering into the cabin, when it gets to us, it is an irritant already. But also the oils on our skin have these carbon-carbon double bonds that are quite happy to interact with and bond with 2 of the oxygens from the O3, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And start forming other stuff like aldehydes and what was the other functional group you talked about?
Ketones.
Ketones. Yes, ketones. And form some new stuff that isn't the kind of stuff we'd want on us and around us anyway.
Yep.
And can kind of create this pollution cloud of stuff that we wouldn't normally have hanging around us.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that's not helped by the fact that we are stationary. Even though the air is being filtered out and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like and moving. It's still like I'm stuck in this seat.
Yeah.
And it's actually possible for a cloud of other stuff to just kind of form around me.
Yeah.
And make me feel maybe a little yuck and potentially irritated because we don't really like to have aldehydes and ketones on our skin all the time. I'm gathering.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in our lungs.
Yes, in our lungs. Did I miss anything?
Did you say what the key feature of the ketone and aldehyde functional group is?
2 carbons. Oh, is this it?
The carbon-carbon double bond.
Uh-huh.
And then it breaks.
Uh-huh. And then there's they each bond to an oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And do they stay bonded and then have the oxygens as well? They separate. And they double bond to oxygens.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if my knuckles are each a carbon and they have 2 things linking them, both things break and then you get oxygens.
Got it.
Now there is a way that you can just break one and they'll still be bonded to each other and they get bonded to an oxygen.
Okay.
But usually it's a single bond to an oxygen makes an alcohol.
Got it.
We call that. It's also sort of an oxidative cleavage, but adding alcohols is a diol addition.
So carbon double bond breaks.
Yep.
Each carbon double bonds to an oxygen.
Yep.
Nice.
It's basically trading out the double bond to the other carbon for a double bond to an oxygen.
Okay.
And then those things, have a whole plethora of other things. But one big thing about it is because those oil chains are long.
Mm-hmm.
If you break it at every place that there's a double bond, now they're short.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're short, they're easier to volatilize, right? Because they're small, easier to lower molecular weight. So they don't require as much energy to basically vaporize, like go into the air.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of them being oil staying on our skin, it makes it easier for them to be up in the air and make that cloud.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so are you ready for the gross fun fact?
Yes, very gross.
Because so many people sit in airplane seats and leave behind those body oils, you can get the Pigpen effect in an empty airplane seat.
Wow. So just someone's leftover oils.
Everyone's that sat in that seat leftover oils.
That's crazy.
So even if you're perfectly showered, perfectly clean, you get on the airplane, if there's a influx of ozone, you're getting someone else's Pigpen effect.
Wow. So I guess the solution is like get on there wearing one of those like yellow hazmat suits.
Yeah.
Wow. And the good thing about that is that would help you like look a lot less suspicious too. Like just to make sure that no one thinks you're weird and stuff.
I will say that this series has made me be like, should I just always have a mask on planes?
And there's people who've like done that for years, pre-COVID and stuff. And I always kind of wondered, are they not wanting to get sick? That makes the most sense. But then I thought also, maybe there's a chance they're a little sick and they're being really nice to everybody.
Right. Or
they're not wanting to breathe into Pigpen vapors.
Or everybody else's gassy emissions.
Everyone's gassy. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Man, some people have been way ahead of the game on this.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Streets ahead, if you will.
Should I just be always wearing a mask or do I just accept my fate on an airplane?
Yeah. Wow.
So something to think about as I board an airplane tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it'd be fun to wrap it up. That was it for the lesson. Do you have any questions?
I don't, but I love that it's called the Pigpen Effect. I didn't really comment on that, but I love that so much. There was a time not long ago we were on a walk, and you know how you get those times where like you'll walk near like a group of gnats, and then they like decide to follow you.
Yeah,
that was happening, and my wife was getting frustrated because there was this group of gnats following her. She was like, "Arr!" And then my oldest son was like, "Whoa, what's happening? What's happening?" And I was like, you know how Pigpen has that, and then I only got those words out, and then I got hit in the arm. But it was just
that's funny.
And my son knows that reference, so it's kind of perfect.
That is kind of perfect.
So anyway.
I'm impressed that he knows that reference.
What is the category?
Okay, for categories, I thought it'd be fun to say, what is your best flying tip?
Oh, okay.
I have mine ready to go.
Okay. Go with yours then.
Mine is to get a good bag system. We've talked about this before, but I was flying a lot for work, and it would always end up inevitably, if I checked a bag, I'd have a heavy backpack with like my work stuff on, and then I'd be like running through the airport or rushing because it's like quick layovers with a heavy backpack, which is like, then you're sweaty and it's like a whole thing, and it's very frustrating.
Yep.
And I called my sister who travels a lot, and she's like, no, you get a carry-on sized rolling bag, all 4 rolly wheels, and a backpack that rides on it.
Right.
And for me, that has changed the game.
Nice.
And then if I'm rushing between flights, I'm not carrying anything. I'm just bringing my little rolly bag, and it rolls quick, you know? And I'm never sweaty in the like backpack region, you know? It's great. And the backpack I have also, because it's designed for airplanes, I can put the things I'm going to need on the flight in the outside. Like, it's really easy to get to your laptop, and it's really easy to get to your charger. So I like save those things. Because I travel enough for work, it's like worth it for me to have a travel backpack, and like that's what it's for. Is I'm like, this is only for that. We're going to make this last as long as possible. We're going to treat it nice. I abuse my day-to-day backpack, but that backpack is like pristine inside of its suitcase. That's my tip.
Nice. I like that tip. I personally don't like rolling suitcases. But I think that the overall tip is find a good system.
Yeah.
And it, meets your preferences, but also your actual functional stuff.
Yeah.
And
having the carry-on, you can put it up really easily if you get a small one, and then you don't have to wait for your check bag. So there's a lot about it for me that it's like you get that system down and you stick with it.
I'm definitely very into the not checking a bag for sure.
Yeah.
I think the first thing I thought of was when you fly, let them fly. Meaning let your gas out, So that's my biggest tip specifically for you.
Thank you. I'll try, but I probably won't be able to.
Tomorrow, just think about all the things going on and be like, it's not my fault. This is what's happening with the air pressure. Everyone's doing it,
I'll try. I'll definitely try.
My second tip would be, I feel like you have asked this before when you were going on a long flight somewhere. I don't remember where you were going. I think I gave you some tips, but can't remember. I've done a lot of long flights. And so I don't know. I feel like I probably have a bunch.
Yeah.
They're just like very internalized, you know? I'm just like, yeah, of course you would do that. But
you always do that, yeah.
Forget what it's like to...
I have a few that I'm thinking of.
There's definitely like, depending on the planes you're going to be on and how long the flights are and stuff, like if I'm going to be on one of those long flights, like going to Central Asia or New Zealand or whatever, where I try to plan ahead a little bit of like, I'm going to do this and this, and then I'm going to sleep and I'm going to do this, and kind of just like break the flight up in my head. Yeah. And for shorter flights, that's not necessary. You can totally wing it, but for long ones, I feel like you need to do that so you don't go crazy. And one of the things that we would always do at the humanitarian organization I worked for was, no matter how long you've been flying, because sometimes to get to certain places we were going, you'd be on multiple flights. No matter how long you've been flying, when you land where you're at, you need to stay up until 9 p.m. or 8 p.m. or something like that. You just have to do it. There'll be there's so much temptation to go take a nap because you do kind of need it, but you will be much more right as rain and on the schedule of the time zone you are in now. If you just force yourself to stay up until like 9 p.m.
A little bit longer.
Local time.
Nice.
That saved my rear many times. But yeah, I can't think of a more cool, relatable one. I certainly second yours. So, yeah.
One thing that changed the game for me when I was flying a lot for work is you can get a credit card. And listen, I don't advise going into debt. But the way that I use my credit card is I pay it off completely every single month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I was already using a credit card to buy things, and then the school would pay me back and I would pay it off. And so I invested in one of those travel cards. And I was like, this seems like so much because it's like a $400 annual fee.
Yes.
But you get a $300 reimbursement if you travel. And the school was paying for me to travel.
Right.
And so I would basically, for $100, get perks like being in an airport lounge.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that has changed everything about being in airports. So if you're someone who travels a lot for work, I cannot recommend getting one of those enough.
Interesting.
And if you're in a situation where you are like stuck at a place overnight, consider getting a lounge. If there's a 24-hour one, it's probably worth it and cheaper than a hotel.
Oh, yeah.
And it's way comfier seating. People probably aren't going to steal your stuff because there's like workers around.
Yeah.
Mason was super, like it paid for itself immediately because that year we had gone on a trip to Mexico and Mason got a stomach bug pretty bad.
Oh, yeah.
I was fine, but he wouldn't let me bring my work laptop. Okay. So that was the setup for the situation. He felt so bad that he couldn't explore the city, and you can't really get into the lounges until about 3 hours before your flight. And so we stayed at the Airbnb until it was like time that he could get in, and then we went straight there so that he could be throwing up in more comfort. And so there was these big, nice recliners, and we were just hanging out, and he wouldn't let me bring my work laptop. So all I could do was read and eat these like delicious snacks that people gave me. And just every once in a while, pat him on the back and be like, sorry that you feel bad.
Yeah.
And then just enjoy like kind of my dream vacation, just like reading books and people bringing me snacks.
Yeah.
So that paid off quickly. And if you're ever in a tight situation and there is a lounge option, they could be expensive for one time. But if I was trapped in an airport overnight now, even if I didn't have that, I would get into a lounge as soon as I possibly could.
Yeah. I wish that more of them were 24-hour. There's so many in some places that are like, opens at, sometimes it's pretty early, which is nice, but it's not like overnight. That's interesting. Yeah, I feel like for people who travel a lot for work and stuff, that's definitely worthwhile. I've been in several lounges, and we've had a travel card for a long time. And what's interesting is I was just telling someone this morning who texted me asking for card recommendations. I was like, you know what? I don't use them anymore. Like they totally lost their luster for me. It's like I had experienced all this stuff of them in the lounges and stuff. And because I don't travel for work anymore.
I feel like that's the big thing. Yeah.
So I was like, I wouldn't recommend one unless you're just like,
traveling for work a lot.
Yeah. But I was like, most of the perks are really, really worth it for only a very tiny percentage.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Which is kind of a bummer, but they seem so cool, And like the bonus you get is the most points you ever get. And then everything else takes forever to build.
Get points. Yeah.
It just is so slow, which is how obviously they got to design these systems to benefit them.
Yeah.
So,
well, for people who travel a lot for work, I would say I fly like 6 times a year at least. And that has been, it's like every time you go to an airport, it's like a little extra treat.
Yeah.
I just really love it. So I really liked that and enjoyed it a lot.
Nice.
Although it does depend, like, what's your home airport? What kind of little treats do you get? But
yeah.
And I would say it's probably saved me a ton of money on buying food in the airport because you can just go there and get food for free.
Yeah.
And it's not always the best food, but neither is airport food.
Yeah.
Anywhere else either. And it's like a quiet place to go and get some work done. So that's a fun one.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I always recommend to all ladies traveling anywhere where there could be gross bathrooms is to bring a pee style, which I think we've talked about extensively on the community.
Yeah, we did actually. Yeah.
Was it on a regular episode or a community?
I don't remember.
Do you have any tips for how to sleep on the plane?
You could always do a Benadryl situation, at your own risk. Ask your doctor. But
we're not that kind of doctor.
Yeah, I don't. I hate the idea of bringing Nick pillows and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like just
me
another
too.
thing to fuss with.
Yeah.
So I don't do that. I've seen people, like bring a jacket they have in their backpack and then they can use that as like a pillow kind of thing. That's the perfect deal. I had this rain jacket that I brought that it's not as like as I don't know, like plasticky as some rain jackets, and it folds up into a pouch, which is like a kind of little pillow. Uh-huh. So stuff like that you can do, but I have talked to people who have no idea that the headrest things bend to enclose your head to keep you from like drifting around too much. Yeah. So doesn't make the sleep amazing, but it's better.
You can use that. Yeah.
Better than nothing, keeps you from like accidentally leaning on your neighbor. But I don't know. I can sleep in a lot of places, so I feel like that's something that does vary from person to person a lot. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's some people who just cannot sleep.
I could sleep anywhere for a very long time, and then on my 24-hour flight that I thought I was going to be able to sleep on, it wasn't a 24-hour flight, but it was a 24-hour series of events. I thought I was going to be able to sleep through the night, and I was awake the whole, it was probably like a 10-hour flight. And that was the day that I realized, I can't sleep on planes anymore. It was like suddenly I could, and then suddenly I couldn't.
I did think of a tip. This is something that's very, very, very worth it.
Okay.
Get some kind of noise canceling headphones.
Okay.
That is huge for just comfort on a plane, period, but also it'll help you sleep so much better.
Yeah.
Whether you're listening to something or not, just like that, the noise of the plane, that hum of the engines and all that kind of stuff.
Baby's crying.
You never know what's going to be on the plane. You never know who's going to be around. Are you trying to sleep and the people like right in front of you or behind you having a lively conversation?
Yeah.
Obviously, good for them. They're having fun, but I'm trying to sleep.
Yeah.
Of all the times that noise canceling earbuds or headphones are helpful, airplane is the top, I would say.
That's a good tip.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
that was fun.
Thanks so much for your airplane tips and for letting me teach you about gross things about planes.
Thanks for teaching me, even though there's a little part of me, but definitely less than 50% of me that wishes I didn't know.
Doesn't know. Yeah. Oh, but that's a tip. You could bring Lysol wipes on you on the plane with you.
Nice. Yeah.
Hand sanitizer always accessible.
Hand sanitizer, Lysol wipes, hazmat suit, gas mask,
rebreather.
Yes. All that stuff. Well, thanks for teaching us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, these kinds of questions, and you never know what can spawn a cool two-parter series or a great question on our Q&R. So we love getting questions from you all. So send us your questions, your thoughts, your ideas, your feedback, your follow-up questions on our website at chemforyourlife.com. That's chem, F-O-R, yourlife.com to share your thoughts and ideas with us. If you'd like to help us keep our show going and contribute to cover the cost of making it, you can do it on our super cool Chem community of patrons on patreon.com/chemforyourlife. You get an ad-free feed of the show. You get some perks, behind the scenes stuff, ways of us saying thank you. And we could not make this show without our patrons. And so we'd love to have you join that Chem community. If you're not able to do that, though, you can still help us by subscribing on our favorite podcast app, rating and writing a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, subscribing on YouTube, leaving a comment over there. Those things help our show to be found by more people, help more people to understand the chemistry of their everyday life.
And we'd like to thank each of those community members by name. So we'd like to thank Chris and Claire S., Hunter R., Katrina B., Lynn S., Scott B., Stephen B., Timothy P., Ash, Brian, Chelsea, Dorian V., Elizabeth P., Emily H., Heather, John T., Jesse R., Latila, Rachel, Autoclave, Avishai B., Chelsea B., Sierra L., Cullen R., Emerson W., Erica B., Jacob T., Jeanette N., Julie S., Christina G., Sarah M., Suzanne P., Venus R., and Vince W. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. This episode of Chemistry for Your Life was created by me, Melissa Collini, and him, J.M. Robinson.
And if you'd like to learn more about today's chemistry lesson, you can check out the references for this episode in our show notes or in the description of the video on YouTube.
Yay, chemistry.
Yay, chemistry.
Yay, airplanes. Or maybe like, ew, airplanes.
Yeah, it's like a little bit like, yeah.
Like, ugh.